The warning lights inside the Galactic Council chamber had never turned red before. In 4,000 years of recorded history, across hundreds of species and 1,000,000 star systems, those lights had stayed a calm blue. But now they burned red, and every diplomat, ambassador, and military officer in the great circular hall felt the same cold fear crawling up their spines. High Arbiter Ficeron stood at the center of the chamber. He was tall, even for a Velothi. His insectoid body was covered in dark, shimmering plates, and his forearms hung at his sides as he stared at the holographic display floating above the floor. The display showed a map of the galaxy. Large sections of it were turning black, one after another, like a disease spreading across skin. "The Virak have taken the entire outer ring," said Fleet Admiral Korvan. The old reptilian officer stood near the war table, his thick green scales dull under the emergency lights. His voice was steady, but his clawed hands gripped the edge of the table hard enough to scratch the metal. "They hit 3 frontier sectors at the same time. We lost contact with 47 colonies in the first 6 hours. The chamber erupted. Ambassadors shouted over each other. Some demanded immediate military action. Others demanded that their own homeworlds be protected first. A few simply sat in silence, their faces blank with shock. Ficeron raised one of his 4 hands, and the room slowly fell quiet. "Admiral Korvan," he said, his voice calm and measured, "what are our options?" Korvan activated a tactical overlay on the map. A cluster of blue dots appeared near the Valen system. "I have assembled every available warship from every member species. It is the largest combined fleet in Council history. 3,200 ships. I intend to hold the line at Valen 4. It is a natural choke point. If we stop them there, we stop their advance." Ambassador Leune, the representative from Pelori Maris, leaned forward in her floating chair. She was an aquatic species, her pale blue skin glistening under a thin layer of moisture. Her dark eyes were sharp and worried. "And if we do not stop them there?" Korvan did not answer immediately. That silence said more than words ever could. The fleet launched 2 days later. 3,000 warships from 12 different species, carrying the hopes of an entire galaxy. Ficeron watched them go from the observation deck of Atheris Prime, and tried to feel hope. He could not. The Battle of Valen 4 lasted 11 hours. The reports came in broken pieces, fragments of screaming voices and shaking cameras. The Virak came in numbers far greater than expected. Their hive ships were living things, massive organic structures that twisted and pulsed like beating hearts. They fired clouds of biological missiles that ate through metal hulls. When Council ships damaged them, the hive ships healed themselves. When Council captains found a weakness, the Virak adapted and closed it within minutes. Korvan fought with everything he had. He was a brilliant commander, and his crews were brave. But bravery was not enough. The Virak did not just fight battles, they consumed them. They learned from every exchange, evolved from every wound, and grew stronger with every ship they destroyed. By the 8th hour, Korvan knew it was over. He ordered a retreat. Only 12% of his fleet made it out alive. When the surviving ships limped back to Atheris Prime, the Council chamber was quieter than it had ever been. Korvan stood before the assembly with burns on his scales and one arm hanging broken at his side. He told them the truth without decoration. "The Virak cannot be stopped with what we have. Their fleet outnumbers us, outguns us, and adapts faster than we can think. At their current speed, they will reach the inner systems within 3 weeks. Atheris Prime will fall within a month." The alliance began to crack immediately. The Dreathan ambassador recalled his species' remaining warships to protect their homeworld. The Thessarai followed, then the Koreth. One by one, species started pulling away, each one deciding that their own survival mattered more than standing together. Liyun rose from her chair and spoke with a voice that shook with anger. If we scatter, we die alone. The Virak do not negotiate. They do not take prisoners. They consume everything, every world, every ocean, every living thing. If we do not stand together, then we have already lost. Her words slowed the exodus. Fear was a stronger force than reason. In the silence that followed, Viseron made a decision that went against every protocol the Council had ever established. He turned to the communications officer, a young Thesserai woman with trembling hands. "Scan every uncharted region within sensor range," he said. "Look for anything, any signal, any sign of civilization, any indication of organized life." "Sir," the officer said carefully, "most uncharted regions have been surveyed by long-range probes. There is nothing out there." "Scan them again." She did. The results came back mostly empty, as expected. Dead systems, gas clouds, barren rocks. But one region flagged an anomaly. A sector deep in the galactic south, designated Sector 7G null on old star charts. Early probes had found nothing there. No habitable planets, no signs of technology, no intelligent life. It had been dismissed and forgotten centuries ago. But now, deep beneath layers of background radiation, the sensors picked up something. Organized subspace signals. Faint, well hidden, but real. Someone was out there. Someone who did not want to be found. "Should we send a hail?" the communications officer asked. Viseron looked at the map. The black stain of the Virak was spreading toward them like a slow wave of death. He had no fleet. He had no weapons. He had nothing left except the smallest, most desperate thing in the universe. Hope. "Send it," he said. "Send everything. Our situation, our coordinates, our enemy. Send it all." The message was launched into the void on every frequency. It traveled through empty space, past dead stars and silent moons, deep into the region that every chart said was empty. There was no reply. Minutes passed, then hours, then a full day. The council waited, and the silence grew heavier with each passing moment. Some said it had been foolish. Some said there was nothing there. Some said even if someone heard the message, they would not care about strangers dying in a distant part of the galaxy. Viseron sat in his chair and stared at the map. The Virak Armada was already moving toward the inner systems. Time had run out. But deep in Sector 7G null, in a place the galaxy did not know existed, something stirred. Beneath an ocean of ice, inside a command center buried so deep that no scanner could reach it, a wall of screens flickered to life. The message from the Galactic Council played on every monitor. Maps, distress calls, images of burning worlds. All of it. A man in a dark uniform stood before the screens. He watched it all in silence. Then he reached for a communicator and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "We received it. All of it. Begin fleet activation. Protocol Lazarus." Around him, lights began to turn on, one by one, stretching down a corridor that seemed to go on forever. Deep beneath the ice, machines that had waited for a very long time began to wake up. The first world to be fully consumed was Pelori Maris. Ambassador Loon stood alone in her quarters aboard Aetheris Prime and watched the footage that her people had managed to send before the end. The Virak hive ships descended on her beautiful water world like a swarm of locusts falling on a field of grain. They drained the oceans. Not metaphorically, they literally drained them. Massive organic tubes dropped from the hive ships into the water and sucked it up into their living hulls. Cities that had floated on the surface for 10,000 years crashed to the exposed seabed and shattered like glass. The last image was from a camera on a coastal tower. It showed the horizon where the great Western Ocean had been. There was nothing there now, just wet, dark mud stretching to the edge of the world. Loon turned off the screen and sat in the dark for a long time. In the council chamber, The mood was beyond panic. It had settled into something worse. Acceptance. Korvan had gathered his remaining ships and was attempting hit-and-run attacks on Virak's supply lines, but it was like throwing stones at a flood. The Viraks simply absorbed the damage and kept moving. Korvan requested a private meeting with Thesaurus. The old admiral stood in the Arbiter's office and spoke without pretense. "We have weeks," he said. "Not months. Weeks, and that is being generous." Thesaurus nodded slowly. "And the signal we sent into Sector 7G null?" "No response. Whatever is out there, if anything is out there, they are not coming." But Korvan was wrong. Something was very much out there, and it was already moving. Deep in Sector 7G null, in a part of space the galaxy had written off as empty, there existed a civilization that had been hiding for over 300 years. They called themselves humans, and they had a story of their own. 3 centuries ago, humanity had nearly destroyed itself. A great war on their homeworld, Earth, had burned half the planet and killed billions. The survivors looked up at the stars and made a choice. They would leave. Not to conquer, not to explore, to survive. They packed what they could into the largest ships they could build, and flew into the deepest, darkest corner of the galaxy they could find. Sector 7G null was perfect. It was a cluster of dead stars, frozen moons, and asteroid fields. No one would ever look for life there, because no sane species would choose to live there. But humans were stubborn. They carved cities into asteroids. They built stations inside ice moons. They farmed in underground caverns lit by artificial suns. And slowly, painfully, they rebuilt. But they never forgot what had happened on Earth. They never forgot that the universe was dangerous, and that trust was a luxury that could get you killed. So they hid. They masked their signals, cloaked their ships, and watched the galaxy from the shadows. They studied every species, mapped every conflict, and learned everything they could without ever being seen. Director Alexander Morozov was the head of Solcom, the unified human military and intelligence command. He was an old man with white hair and cold blue eyes that had seen too many reports about too many terrible things. He stood now in the central war room of Titan Base, the hidden heart of human civilization, buried beneath the frozen surface of a moon they had named New Svalbard. Before him stood Captain Elara Vasquez, commander of the HSS Erebus, the most advanced warship humanity had ever built. She was in her early 40s, with dark hair cut short and a scar running along her jaw from a training accident years ago. She was calm in the way that dangerous people are calm, not because she lacked feeling, but because she had trained herself to put feeling aside when the situation demanded it. "You have seen the Council's transmission," Morozov said. It was not a question. "I have," Vasquez replied. "Then you understand what Protocol Lazarus means." She did. Every human officer knew about Protocol Lazarus. It was the plan that existed for the day when hiding was no longer enough. The day when the galaxy's problems became humanity's problems, whether they liked it or not. "The Virak will reach the inner council systems within weeks," Morozov said, pulling up a holographic star map. "After that, they will spread to every corner of the galaxy. If they are allowed to grow unchecked, they will eventually find us too. Hiding only works if the predator has other prey. When the prey runs out, the predator starts looking harder." He paused and looked at Vasquez directly. "But that is not why I am activating the fleet." "Then why?" Morozov was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Because staying hidden while billions die is not survival. And I did not build this fleet to be a coward." Vasquez nodded. That was enough for her. The briefing was short. Humanity had spent 3 centuries preparing for this moment. The Terran Shadow Fleet consisted of 4,000 warships, each one built with technologies that the rest of the galaxy had never imagined. Their hulls were coated in phased null armor, a material that bent light and sensor waves around it, making the ships nearly invisible. Their weapons included directed singularity rounds, tiny artificial black holes that could be fired like bullets and that collapsed anything they touched. And every ship was linked to a central tactical AI network that could process millions of battlefield decisions per second, faster than any living mind. Vasquez walked through the corridors of the Erebus and felt the ship humming beneath her feet. Her crew was already at their stations. She passed Dr. Nia Okafor in the main corridor. Okafor was the ship's chief science officer, a tall woman with kind eyes and a quick mind. She was the smartest person Vasquez had ever met, and also the most human. "Are you ready?" Vasquez asked. Okafor smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "I have spent my whole life studying alien species through intercepted signals and stolen data. I have never actually seen one in person. None of us have." She paused. "What do you think they will think of us?" Vasquez considered the question. 3 centuries of hiding, 3 centuries of watching from the dark, and now they were about to step into the light with the largest war fleet the galaxy had ever seen. "They will think what they think," she said. "Our job is not to be liked. Our job is to make sure there is still a galaxy left to have opinions." Okafor nodded slowly. It was not a comforting answer, but it was an honest one. Across Sector 7G Null, the activation signals spread like a heartbeat. On frozen moons and hidden asteroid bases, docking clamps released and hangar doors opened. Ships that had never seen combat slid out of their berths and into the black void of space. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and dreadnoughts, 4,000 of them, forming up in a formation so precise it looked like a single living thing. The Shadow Fleet turned toward the galaxy and began to move. On the edge of Council space, a deep space sensor post was running on emergency power. The 3-person crew had been preparing to evacuate when their instruments screamed to life. Something was coming. Something massive. The subspace disturbance was so large that the sensors could not calculate its size. It was moving at a speed that should have been impossible. The senior operator, a young Thessari man with wide eyes, stared at his screen and whispered to his colleagues, "What is that?" But whatever it was heading straight for the Virac Armada, and it was not slowing down. The Galactic Council War Room had become a place of sleepless eyes and cold coffee. Officers from a dozen species sat at their stations, watching sensors and waiting for the end. They had calculated the Virac advance down to the day. 12 more days until the Hive Fleet reached Aetheris Prime. 12 days until everything ended. Then the sensors picked up something that made no sense at all. A subspace disturbance of enormous size was moving through the galaxy at speeds that no known species could achieve. It was not coming from Virac space. It was not coming from any Council territory. It was coming from the galactic south, from the direction of Sector 7G Null. High Arbiter Thysoran was pulled from his quarters in the middle of the night cycle. He arrived at the war room with his carapace still dull from sleep, and found every officer staring at the same screen. The disturbance was heading directly for the Karen system, where the main body of the Virac Armada was gathered, preparing for its final push. "How large is it?" Thysoran asked. The sensor officer swallowed hard. "Sir, based on the subspace displacement, we estimate between 3,000 and 5,000 individual vessels." The chamber went silent. 3,000 to 5,000 ships. That was larger than the fleet the Council had lost at Valon 4. "Who are they?" Thysoran demanded. "Unknown. No identification signals, no known energy signatures, nothing in any database matches what we are seeing." Admiral Corvan arrived minutes later. He studied the data with the eyes of a man who had spent his life reading battlefields. His expression did not offer comfort. "It could be reinforcements from somewhere we do not know about," he said slowly. "Or it could be something worse than the Virac." Ambassador Liyun, who had barely spoken since the fall of her homeworld, looked up from her chair. Or, she said quietly, it could be the answer to the message we sent. Nobody wanted to believe it. Nobody wanted to hope. Hope had become a dangerous thing in the council. But they watched, because watching was all they could do. In the Karen system, the Virak Armada floated in a massive cloud of 10,000 hive ships. They pulsed and throbbed like a living reef, connected by webs of biological signals controlled by the Overmind, the central intelligence that guided every Virak drone, every ship, every spore. The Overmind had never known defeat. It had consumed 43 civilizations across its long existence. The Galactic Council was simply the next meal. The Overmind sensed the approaching fleet. It did not recognize the energy signatures. It did not feel concern. New things were simply new things to consume and learn from. It turned a portion of its attention toward the incoming force and prepared to adapt, as it always did. The Terran Shadow Fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at exactly 0347 hours, Galactic Standard Time. They did not appear at the edge of the system and advanced slowly, as every known military doctrine suggested. They appeared directly inside the Virak formation. 4,000 human warships materialized in the spaces between hive ships, so close that some Virak vessels could have reached out and touched them. It was a move so insane, so reckless, that no tactical computer in the galaxy would have recommended it. But the humans had not asked for recommendations. The first shots were fired before the Virak even understood what was happening. Directed singularity rounds tore through the nearest hive ships, punching holes in their organic hulls that collapsed inward like water going down a drain. The rounds did not just damage the ships, they erased them. Matter folded in on itself and vanished, leaving nothing behind but empty space. The Virak reacted with the speed that had made them the most feared force in the galaxy. Hive ships turned and fired clouds of biological missiles. Spore clouds erupted to blind enemy sensors. The Overmind reached out to study the new enemy and adapt. But it could not find them. The human ships were coated in phase null armor that bent Virak biosensors around them like water flowing around a stone. The hive ships fired blindly, hitting empty space while the human vessels moved untouched through the chaos. It was like fighting shadows. Captain Vasquez stood at the center of the Erebus command bridge, watching the battle unfold on the tactical display. Green dots were human ships. Red dots were Virak. The red dots were disappearing fast. Wolfpack formations, maintain pattern cycling, she ordered. Her voice was steady, almost bored, but her eyes were sharp and focused. Do not let them lock onto any single attack vector for more than 30 seconds. The tactical AI network processed her order and translated it into 10,000 individual commands across the fleet. Human ships moved in coordinated packs, striking from different angles every half-minute, never repeating a pattern. The Virak tried to evolve countermeasures, tried to adapt as they always had. But the human AI adapted faster. Every time the Virak closed one weakness, the AI found two new ones. For the first time in its ancient existence, the Overmind felt something it had never felt before. It was falling behind. 2 hours into the battle, the Overmind tried to communicate. A signal burst from the central hive ship on all frequencies, carrying the psychic weight of a mind that had crushed civilizations. It was a threat, a demand for surrender, and an offer of absorption all wrapped into one terrible pulse. Vasquez looked at the communication officer. "Cut it," she said. The channel was closed. There was nothing to discuss. By the 4th hour, it was over. The Karen system, which had been filled with 10,000 Virak hive ships, was now filled with debris. Clouds of dead organic matter drifted through space like ash after a forest fire. Broken pieces of hive ships tumbled in slow spirals. their biological systems dark and lifeless. The Terran Shadow Fleet held position among the wreckage. 4,000 ships arranged in perfect formation. They had not lost a single vessel. On Aetheris Prime, the Galactic Council watched the battle recordings in complete silence. The sensor data had been relayed in real time, and every diplomat, officer, and analyst in the chamber had seen the entire thing. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Thiseron stared at the display. His 4 hands were trembling. Beside him, Leon had gone pale, her blue skin almost white. Admiral Corvan, who had spent 60 years fighting wars, who had faced the Virak and survived, who had thought he understood what power looked like, stood perfectly still. "We were never the apex predator," Corvan said quietly. It was not a complaint or an accusation. It was simply a fact, stated by a soldier who finally understood how small he was. For 1 full hour after the battle, the unknown fleet sat in silence. No communication, no identification. The Council sent hails. They were not returned. The galaxy held its breath and waited. Then, a single transmission cut through the static. It was sent on an open, unencrypted channel. Every species, every station, every ship with a receiver heard it at the same time. A woman's voice, clear and calm, speaking in a language that the universal translators scrambled to process. "This is Captain Ilara Vasquez of the Terran vessel Erebus, representing the human race. We mean you no harm, but we need to talk." The message played once and then stopped. Across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds and 10,000 stations, people of every species stood frozen. Some felt relief, some felt terror, most felt both at the same time. In the council chamber, Thisoran listened to the message 3 times. Then he turned to his communications officer and said, "Open a channel to Captain Vasquez. Tell her we are listening." The officer's hands were shaking as she sent the reply. Thisoran did not blame her. His own hands were shaking too. A new species had just announced itself to the galaxy. They had done it not with words or diplomacy, but by destroying the most powerful military force anyone had ever known. And they had done it in 4 hours, without losing a single ship. The galaxy had been saved, but the question that hung in the air, unspoken but felt by everyone, was simple and terrifying. What happens now? The galaxy did not sleep that night. On every world, on every station, on every ship still floating in the dark, people talked about the same thing. The humans, the unknown fleet that had appeared from nowhere and erased the Virak Armada like it was nothing. On Aetheris Prime, the Council was in chaos. Not the panicked, screaming chaos of the days before, when the Virak were closing in and death seemed certain. This was a different kind of chaos. The confused, uncertain chaos of people who had been saved by something they did not understand, and were not sure they should trust. High Arbiter Thiseron worked through the night to arrange a formal meeting. He sent a diplomatic invitation to Captain Vasquez, offering safe passage to Aetheris Prime for a human delegation. For several tense hours, there was no response. Then finally, a short reply came back. "Accepted. We will arrive in 12 hours. The Council spent those 12 hours arguing. Some species wanted to greet the humans as heroes. Others wanted to greet them with weapons. Councillor Drethvar, the Drathan representative, was the loudest voice of suspicion. He was a large, heavily built reptilian, older than Corvan, but without the Admiral's quiet wisdom. He had the kind of pride that came from never having been truly tested. "We know nothing about these creatures," Drethvar said, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. "They hid from us for centuries. They watched us. They studied us without our knowledge or consent. And now they appear with a fleet powerful enough to destroy the Virak in hours. How do we know they will not turn that fleet on us next?" Leon answered him, "Because if they wanted to destroy us, they would not have needed to wait for the Virak to soften us up first. They could have done it at any time." Drethvar did not like that answer. He did not like it. because it was true. The human shuttle arrived exactly on time. It landed on the main diplomatic platform of Atheris Prime, a wide, open space designed for first contact ceremonies. Hundreds of council officials and diplomats gathered to watch. Security forces from 6 different species lined the walkways, their weapons not quite pointed at the shuttle, but not quite pointed away either. The shuttle door opened, and Captain Ilara Vasquez stepped out. The first thing that struck the assembled aliens was how ordinary she looked. They had seen the battle recordings. They had watched 4,000 ships tear apart the most feared armada in the galaxy. They had expected something terrifying, something massive and armored and sharp. Instead, they got a woman of average height, with short dark hair and a scar on her jaw. She wore a simple dark uniform with no decorations except a small emblem on her shoulder. She walked with the steady, unhurried pace of someone who was used to being in dangerous places and had decided long ago not to let it show. Behind her came Dr. Nia Okafor, taller, with warm brown eyes that moved across the alien faces with open curiosity. And behind Okafor, a small honor guard of 4 human soldiers, unarmed, their hands visible at their sides. The aliens stared. The humans stared back. For a long, strange moment, 2 branches of life that had never met stood face to face and tried to make sense of each other. Ficeron stepped forward. He towered over Vasquez by nearly 2 feet. His insectoid face was not built for human-readable expressions, but his voice carried warmth. Captain Vasquez, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I welcome you, and I thank you. Vasquez nodded. High Arbiter, we are glad we arrived in time. The formal session began an hour later in the main council chamber. Vasquez and Okafor sat at a table facing the assembled representatives of dozens of species. It was the most watched broadcast in galactic history. Every world with a receiver was tuned in. The questions came fast and hard. A Thessari diplomat asked the first one, "How long have you been watching us?" Vasquez did not hesitate. Approximately 300 years. The chamber buzzed with shock. 3 centuries. 300 years of silent observation, and no one had ever detected them. Why did you not make contact? Asked a Koroth representative, his voice tight with anger. Vasquez took a breath. Because the last time my species trusted others with knowledge of our existence, our homeworld burned. We learned a hard lesson. We decided to survive first and make friends later. Drethvar leaned forward. You say you come in peace, but you built a fleet of 4,000 warships in secret. You developed weapons that can destroy anything in this galaxy. That is not the behavior of a peaceful species. That is the behavior of a predator. The chamber went quiet. Every eye turned to Vasquez. She looked at Drethvar for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was calm but carried an edge of something cold. We built that fleet because we were afraid. We were afraid because we watched your galaxy tear itself apart over and over again. We saw the Virak consume world after world, while the Council debated and argued and delayed. We built those weapons because we knew that someday the darkness would come for us too, and we decided that when it came, we would be ready. That does not answer the question, Drethvar pressed. How do we know you will not use that fleet against us? Dr. Okafor stood up. She was not a soldier, and she did not speak like one. Because if we wanted to conquer you, we would have done it long before the Virak gave us a reason to reveal ourselves. We could have taken this galaxy at any point in the last 200 years. We chose not to. We chose to hide, to watch, to wait. And when we finally did act, it was not to take something. It was to save something. The truth of her words settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. Even Drethvar had no immediate response. The session continued for hours. The humans answered every question honestly, holding nothing back. They explained their history, their technology, their reasons for hiding. They did not apologize for their secrecy, but they did not defend it with arrogance either. They simply explained it, the way a person explains a scar. It happened. It shaped us. We are here now. By the end of the session, the council was split. Many species, led by Leun and supported by Thysoron, wanted to form an alliance with humanity. They had seen what the humans could do, and they had heard their reasons. Trust would take time, but the foundation was there. Others, led by Drethvar and a coalition of proud, frightened species, wanted humanity to disarm. They demanded that the Shadow Fleet be reduced, that human weapons technology be shared with the Council, that humanity submit to galactic oversight. Vasquez listened to these demands with a still face and said nothing. Privately, in a small room after the session, Vasquez sat with Okafor and allowed herself a moment of tiredness. "They are afraid of us," she said. "Can you blame them?" Okafor asked. "No, I expected it. Afraid people do stupid things." The stupid thing came sooner than anyone expected. Intelligence reports arrived the next day. The Virac Overmind had survived the Battle of Karen. It had retreated to the outer territories with a remnant fleet, and was consuming fringe worlds to rebuild its forces. The threat was smaller now, but it was not gone. The Council needed humanity's help to finish the job. But the political will to ask for that help was crumbling under the weight of fear and pride. And in a dark corner of Aetheris Prime, Councillor Drethvar made a decision that would nearly destroy everything. He opened a secret communication channel, one that bypassed every security protocol, and sent a message to the Virac Overmind. The message was simple. He offered the exact location of humanity's hidden territory in Sector 7G Null. In exchange, the Virac would bypass Drythan space and leave his people untouched. The Overmind received the message. It processed the information with the cold, efficient hunger that defined its existence. A new target, a hidden prey, the species that had heard it for the first time. It sent back a single pulse of agreement. Drethvar closed the channel and told himself he had saved his people. He did not allow himself to think about what he had just done to everyone else. The alarm reached Titan Base at 0200 hours. Director Morozov was asleep when the call came, but he was fully awake within seconds. Old soldiers never truly slept. They just closed their eyes and waited for the next disaster. The intelligence officer's voice was tight with controlled panic. "Sir, the Virac remnant fleet has changed course. They are no longer heading for the outer colonies. They are heading directly for Sector 7G Null. Directly for us." Morozov stood in the dark of his quarters and felt something cold settle in his chest. The Virac had never shown any interest in Sector 7G Null. They had no reason to, unless someone had told them what was hidden there. "Someone betrayed us," he said. It was not a guess. He was in the war room within 10 minutes, and Captain Vasquez was on a secure channel within 15. She was still on Aetheris Prime, still dealing with council politics, but her face changed the moment she saw the tactical data. "How long until they reach our territory?" she asked. 48 hours, Morozov said. "And Alara, this is not the same fleet we destroyed at Karen. The Overmind has had time to evolve. Our analysts believe their ships have adapted specifically to counter our technology. Phase null armor may no longer be fully effective. Our AI network patterns may be partially predicted." Vasquez absorbed this information without visible reaction. Then she said, "I am coming home. Have every ship ready." She left Aetheris Prime within the hour. Dr. Okafor went with her. As their shuttle lifted off, Okafor looked back at the great station world and the alien faces watching them go. "Do you think they know what is happening?" she asked. "They will," Vasquez said. "The question is what they do about it." On Aetheris Prime, the truth came out fast. Ambassador Leun's intelligence network, built from years of careful diplomacy and well-placed friends, uncovered Drethvar's betrayal within hours. She brought the evidence directly to Thesseron. The High Arbiter read the intercepted communications in silence. His 4 hands were perfectly still. When he finished, he looked up at Leun, and for the first time in the crisis, his composure cracked. There was anger in his compound eyes. Real, burning anger. "Arrest him," he said. Drethvar was taken from his quarters by Council security. He did not go quietly. He shouted justifications as they led him through the corridors. "I saved my people. The humans are the real threat. They watched us for centuries. They are predators wearing the mask of saviors. I did what had to be done." Thesseron met him in the detention area. He stood on the other side of the energy barrier and looked at Drethvar for a long time. "You did not save your people," Thesseron said quietly. "You fed someone else's people to a monster, so that yours might be eaten last. That is not salvation. That is cowardice dressed up as strategy." He turned and walked away. There was no more time for traitors. Thesseron called an emergency session of the Council. He stood before the assembled species and told them everything. The betrayal, the Virak course change, and the fact that humanity's hidden home was now under direct threat. "The humans came out of hiding to save us," he said. "They revealed their greatest secret because they believed it was the right thing to do. And now, because of the actions of one coward among us, they face destruction. The question before this council is simple. What do we do?" The chamber was quiet. Then Ambassador Leun rose from her chair. Her homeworld was gone. Her oceans were drained. She had lost everything. But her voice was steady and clear. "They came out of the dark for us," she said. "What does it say about us if we leave them in it?" Admiral Korvan stood next. The old reptilian commander, whose fleet had been shattered at Valen IV, whose pride had been humbled by the display at Karen, straightened his broad shoulders and spoke. "I have enough ships for one more fight. I pledge them to the defense of Sector 7G Null." One by one, other species followed. Not all. Some stayed silent, too afraid or too selfish to act. But enough stood, enough said yes. Korvan assembled the combined council fleet. It was smaller than what he had led at Valen IV. The ships were older, patched together, crewed by exhausted officers. But they came, and they flew towards Sector 7G Null as fast as their engines could carry them. The Battle of Sector 7G Null began on a Tuesday, though no one remembered that later. The Virak remnant fleet, rebuilt and evolved, dropped into human space with the fury of a wounded animal. 2,000 hive ships, each one redesigned to fight humans specifically. And for the first time, human ships started taking damage. The Virak had evolved biosensors that could partially see through phased null armor. Their organic hulls now generated interference fields that disrupted AI communication networks. Their biological missiles had been redesigned to fragment into thousands of smaller pieces that overwhelmed point defense systems. Vasquez commanded the battle from the bridge of the Erebus, and for the first time, she felt the floor shake beneath her feet from enemy impacts. Warning lights flashed. Damage reports came in from across the fleet. Human ships were dying. "We are losing the Kessler and the Johannesburg," her tactical officer reported. "The Virak are pushing through our left flank. Shift reserves to cover, and get Okafor on the line. I need her to crack their new bio-encryption. If we cannot get our AI network back to full coordination, we lose this." Deep in the science bay of the Erebus, Dr. Okafor worked with a focus that blocked out everything else. The Virak overmind had changed its communication frequency, scrambling the patterns that the human AI relied on to predict enemy movements. Okafor and her team pulled apart captured Virak signal data, looking for the new key. The battle raged around them. The ship shook. Lights flickered. Okafor did not look up. 3 hours into the battle, just as the human lines began to buckle, the Council fleet arrived. Admiral Corvan led them in personally from the bridge of his battered flagship. The Council ships were not as fast or as powerful as the human vessels. Their weapons could barely scratch the evolved Virak hulls. But they threw themselves into the fight with everything they had. Corvan's fleet hit the Virak from the side, disrupting their formations and drawing fire away from the human lines. Council ships died quickly, but each one bought time. Each one created an opening. Vasquez watched the Council ships enter the battle and felt something she had not expected to feel: gratitude. These were the same species that had argued about whether to trust humans, the same species that had debated and delayed and let fear guide their choices. And now they were here, dying alongside her people because they had decided, at the last possible moment, to be better. "Captain," Okafor's voice crackled over the comm. "I have it. I cracked the frequency. Uploading to the network now." The effect was almost instant. The human tactical AI network surged back to full power, processing the new Virak patterns and generating countermeasures in real time. Human ships began moving with their old precision, striking at weak points the Virak did not even know they had. The tide turned, slowly at first, then all at once. Vasquez saw her opportunity. The Overmind's flagship was at the center of the Virak formation, a massive hive ship pulsing with dark energy. Kill the Overmind, and the entire fleet would collapse. "All ships, cover the Erebus," she ordered. "We are going in." The Erebus drove through the battle like a spear, human and Council ships clearing a path ahead of it. Vasquez pushed the engines past their safety limits. The ship groaned. She did not care. They breached the hive ship's outer hull and drove deep into its organic interior. It was like flying through the belly of a living creature. Walls of tissue pulsed around them. The Overmind sensed them and tried to stop them, sending waves of drones and biological defenses. Inside the core chamber, the Overmind made one final attempt. It reached out with its psychic network and tried to absorb the human minds on the Erebus. It had consumed millions of alien minds before. This should have been simple. It was not. Human minds were messy, contradictory. They held love and rage, hope and despair, logic and madness, all at the same time. The Overmind tried to untangle them and could not, tried to break them and could not, tried to absorb them and was pushed back by the sheer stubborn chaos of what it meant to be human. Vasquez armed the singularity charge. She looked at Okafor. Okafor nodded. She pressed the button. The Overmind died in silence. The singularity collapsed the core of the hive ship inward, folding it into nothing. Across the battlefield, every Virak ship went dark at the same instant, like puppets whose strings had been cut. They drifted, lifeless, and the battle was over. The aftermath was quiet, in the way that only the end of a war can be quiet. Ships floated among the wreckage. Rescue teams searched for survivors. Medics worked without rest. Humans and aliens operated side by side for the first time in history, pulling wounded from shattered hulls and sharing supplies without being asked. 3 days later, the Galactic Council formally offered humanity a seat at the table. Vasquez, standing in the same chamber where she had first faced the Council's suspicion, listened to the offer and then declined. "We are not ready," she said. "And honestly, neither are you. Trust is not something you vote on in a chamber. It is something you build, slowly, over time. But we will leave the door open, and we will not hide any more." Fisoran nodded. He understood. Leun smiled. Corvan saluted, a gesture from his own military tradition, and Vasquez returned it. Trade routes opened in the weeks that followed. Human scientists shared some of their knowledge, and alien scientists shared theirs. It was awkward and clumsy and full of misunderstandings, but it was real. In the command center beneath the ice of New Svalbard, where everything had started, The wall of screens still glowed. But the screens no longer showed threats and warnings and maps of enemy movements. They showed incoming hails. Dozens of them, from dozens of species, asking to talk, to trade, to learn, to connect. A young human officer sat at the console, reading the messages with wide eyes. She smiled and opened the first channel. Behind her, Director Morozov stood in the doorway, watching. He was old and tired and had spent most of his life preparing for war. But the screens before him showed something he had not prepared for at all. Peace. Fragile, imperfect, and uncertain, but real. He whispered to himself, quiet enough that no one heard. "Welcome to the galaxy, I suppose."